ladies and gentlemen, for another exciting, exhilarating Scouser and the Scot.
Today we have someone who the shoe is on the other foot, someone who's interviewed myself and Jamie from King Voodoo. So this time it's questions to you, Anne. How are you doing, Anne? Are you keeping...
I'm absolutely fine, and it's so nice to talk to you again. And I'm quite nervous now. That was my turn.
You've done, honestly, you've done nothing to worry about. You just
we'll see. I'll probably just clam up and won't say anything. I'll be too scared. I'll hide under the table or behind Coco or something.
Well, let's crack on. Let's get the first question underway. Let's see what you've got. So, okay, can you give us an overview, an introduction of how you started? What was your introduction to music? What was the initial thing? What got you into it?
We'd have to go quite a long way back for that. I'm not going to give my age away, but we'd be going back about 40 years, probably more than that, to my actual intro to music. And my parents, I mean, they were born, say, in the 30s and 40s, and they didn't have collections of CDs, like we have nowadays. They didn't even have records. In fact, I don't remember music ever being played in my house growing up, which is quite different to a lot of people that I interviewed. They say, we listened to our dad's CDs and records and stuff. So I didn't have any of that at all. What I do remember from a very, very young age is I love dancing, and this has been something that's run throughout my life. I've always danced, whatever style, I've loved it. I remember dancing to the theme tunes on TV. And I had a very good friend at the time whose parents were into ABBA, and whenever I went to their house, I was dancing and stuff. In spite of not having any music playing in my house, my dad was a self-taught clarinetist, and his mother had been a concert pianist. Well, I only actually found that out after she passed away, but that's the case. When I was about 6 years old, my parents just said to me, my dad said to me, he said, right, what instrument do you want to learn? So it was kind of a given that I was going to learn something classical. And that was my intro very much to music. It was a very classical sort of background I had. And I just said straight away, I want to play the flute. And fortunately, I had one of the best flautist in England teach me. So she was absolutely amazing. And I did recitals, I was in a quintet, and that was really my intro. I didn't really get into, I didn't listen, like my parents, I didn't listen to music, not until my teens. And for some reason, although I was into the pop music like everybody else, in the 80s, it kind of, I don't know, I needed something with a bit more oomph, it was all very, very manufactured. And what really sort of caught my attention was rock and roll, going back 50s, 60s, 70s era. And I used to listen to the radio station called Capital Gold. And that was very different to my peers. I don't think I knew anybody that listened to that station. They maybe listened to Capital Radio. I grew up in London. But Capital Gold was my thing. So I listened to Elvis and Buddy Holly and Beach Boys, Carpenters, all those kind of bands. So I had a really, really good introduction, I think, in every aspect of music, from the classical to the rock and roll, going way back. And then gradually, as I got older, more into rock, hard rock, heavy metal from 80s and 90s.
Ah, cool. So when did you first get directly involved in the music business? What were you doing? How did it come about? And
right, that was actually much more recently than most people think. I've done a lot in a short space of time. So it was only really a few years ago. I'd been out of music altogether, out of the scene, for a very long time, for various reasons. For about 15 years, probably. I could count the number of gigs I've been to within those 15 years on less than one hand, say. And Guns N' Roses, who were one of my huge influences and got me into, heavy metal and rock when I was a teenager, they'd reformed, which was something I thought would never happen. And I always said, right, if they reform, I'm going to go and see them. I have to see them. And when I went to see, we got tickets, went to see them in London. I think, and I can't remember when it was June 2016 or 2017. I think it was 2017, but I can't remember exactly. Someone will know out there. I went to see them, and then all those feelings of how I felt going back, to the 90s when I first heard them, first saw them at Wembley Stadium, they all came rushing back. And I remember got back home to Manchester. I said to myself, I need to know what's going on here. Because when I first moved to Manchester from London in 95, the music scene up here was phenomenal. Not only the indie bands, which wasn't really my thing. Obviously, you had Oasis, which was everywhere. But we had the most amazing metal, rock clubs, everything. And one of the main reasons I wanted to come to Manchester in the first place. So when I came back up here after seeing Guns N' Roses again, I thought, I've got to find out what the scene's like. And I remember contacting Manchester Rocks, thinking, I'd never heard of them, but I did a Google search. They came up. I thought, well, they'll be the right people to ask. So I contacted them. I said, what's going on up here? You know, is there anything? And they kind of, you know, said, well, yeah, there's a few rock bars, there's a few clubs, this sort of thing. Anyway, move ahead a couple of months. Another band that I love from the 90s, the Dogston Moor.
Yeah.
Again, they were now called Tyler's Dogston Moor, and they were one of my favourite glammy bands in the 90s. I saw them in the Marquee in London. Absolutely loved them. They were playing in a local venue of mine called Rebellion, which I'd never heard of before. Now, it's probably the venue I've been to more times and reviewed at more times than anywhere else. So I got tickets, went along. I said to Manchester Rocks, look, I noticed on their website they were looking for writers. I said, look, I'm going to be going to this gig at Rebellion. Would you like me to write a review of it? I thought this is going to be the best way to sort of really check out the scene. And they said, yeah, sure. So I went along, saw Dogston Moor, another band called the Main Grains, and a younger band that I'd never heard of called Guerrilla Riot were on the bill as the second support. And I started listening to their music ahead of going to this gig, thinking, well, I should check out what they sound like before I go, seeing as I've agreed to review this gig. And I've always liked writing, so that didn't worry me at all. I've always been into creative writing, poetry, you know, you name it. So I went and I couldn't believe it. Not only were Dogston Moor as great as I remembered, but sorry, let's go straight. Don't want me wonky, but I was blown away by Guerrilla Riot. I mean, this is in their early days. They already had an album out, I think, and I thought, music this good is being made on my doorstep, and I don't know about it. I don't know anyone that knows about it. You know, it's phenomenal. And I wrote such a review that night. And the editor of Manchester Rock said to me, right, it's your first review. I'll give you 72 hours to hand it in. Well, less than 24 hours later, it was done, dusted, sent off. You know, and the thrill I got from writing it and from doing what I felt was like exposing the amazing talent that we've got on our doorstep. I thought there must be other bands like this. And that's what got me into it. And I said, yeah, I'll review other gigs.
It's funny that, because I didn't realise it was so recent, because the first time I came across you was when Piers from what were then Mouth of the South.
Yeah.
So I said, oh, the person you need to get in contact with is Anne Estella. And I was like, all right, tell me a bit about it. Oh, she knows everybody and everybody knows her. So he made it me. So I just assumed that you've been doing it for a long time.
Everybody says that to me, and it snowballed so fast for me. You know, within, say, 6 months, probably less than that, 3 months, I had so many contacts in the industry that I actually didn't need anybody to get press passes for me for gigs. I was able just to, you know who to ask to get there to review and stuff. So, you know, I've been blessed, I guess. It was just amazing.
So what do you put that down to? Why do you think that? I mean, I could tell you, but I want you to tell us what you think, how you think it happened so fast for you.
Just passion, wanting to get ahead, wanting to get on. Really getting to know the bands, getting to know everybody that supported the bands, the managers, just, you know, finding out who was out there. And it was like, to me, it was like a whole new world that I was just eager to explore, like a kid in a candy shop. Yeah. And I loved it. Just absolutely loved doing that.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
So obviously, as you say, it's only been a short period of time. Can you tell us about, like, you know, give us a brief overview of that, your highlights, your lowlights, anything that sticks out for you? And
okay, most of it's been a highlight, I'd say. Not all of it, obviously. You meet an awful lot of people and an awful lot of very big egos in this industry, and I'm not even talking about the musicians here. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that the public's not aware of, which you become aware of when you're in this industry. But, you know, I've written for 5 publications now. In fact, at one time, I was writing for them all at the same time. So having to sort of really plan my schedule and what I was doing pretty well to make sure that everything got in on time, you know, because if you've got a band releasing material next week, there's no point handing in, you know, a review, like, in 3 weeks' time. You've got to be bang on time within this sort of industry. So I was writing for 5 publications. I was a feature writer for one of them, reviewing and interviewing for the others. I've covered an awful lot of festivals. It started quite slowly. I think the first one I did was SOS, because that's a local Manchester one. And that's brilliant. And then the more I got into it, you know, the next year I went a bit further afield, and this year I think I had 7 festivals I was meant to be interviewing at, and of course none of them have gone ahead. And the last feature I wrote was entitled the top 10 or top 11 festivals of 2020. So I hope you won't blame me for jinxing it for everybody, because that's kind of how I feel. They asked me to word it for 2021, and now I'm looking at it thinking, oh my God, you know, maybe we should just leave it and wait till next year and see what happens then. I did a short stint at a radio station, sort of choosing playlists, and I enjoyed that. I prefer talking to people, so I didn't really get to do that with this particular radio station, so I was just literally playing the tracks, so that was a shame. But the highlight for me, yeah, I'd say the festivals. And people think when you've got press passes for festivals and you're covering it for whichever publication, I cover them for myself now for my YouTube channel, but back then it was generally for Manchester Rocks. People think, oh, it's great, you get to see all these bands. And actually, it doesn't happen at all. I very rarely get to see any performances when I'm covering a festival. I'm in the press room, waiting for the bands to come in, waiting for my time slot. And then if I've got a few minutes break, then I'll wander over to the arena and I'll get something to eat, come back. So it's very much working when I'm at a festival. It's not just, get a drink and just watch the performances.
No, it's definitely not glamorous. I mean, you're obviously well known or best known for, I would say, your passion about the grassroots rock and metal scene. So can you give us an overview of how you think, this is pre-COVID, so up until March, what's your thoughts on the grassroots rock and metal scene at that time?
Amazing. Incredible. The more I got into it, the more new bands I was going to say discovered. Obviously I didn't discover them, but the more bands that I heard, found, thought they're amazing. The standard was incredible. And I don't remember a time when I was really into metal and rock back in the 90s. Even then, you didn't get so many bands of that caliber, you know, that I remember. And of course now it's easier for bands to sort of come to you through the magic of social media rather than having to seek them out through magazines or whatever. But I think it's phenomenal, absolutely. And I think after COVID, it was going to continue to be phenomenal. Hopefully bands will stick together. I know they're finding it very, very hard at the moment. I've already heard of 1 or 2 bands that have split up very, very recently during this period. Venues, of course, the same thing. We had 2 of our major venues in Manchester shut down at the beginning of this COVID lockdown, but have actually been saved. So they're okay for now. But others shutting down, you know, are they going to be there when the pandemic's over? Are musicians going to have somewhere to actually go back to a stage to play from? We just don't know yet, but hopefully the bands will keep it going. I know most of them that I've spoken to are using this time very, very productively, and they're going out and writing, and they're maybe delaying the release of a new album for a little bit, maybe so that they can tour. You know, most bands like to tour to support the new release, so obviously you understand why they would want to do those things together. But, you know, if they can keep going, then hopefully, fingers crossed, things will get back to how it was before and just keep going from strength to strength.
I mean, I would say that one of the things that where bands are concerned, if bands are sitting and have been sitting for the last 6 months and all they're doing is sitting back waiting for the gigs to start, and that's what their whole band life revolves around, gigging, then they are the most vulnerable, purely simply because. But the bands who have taken the time to write new stuff, record new stuff, get better at what they do, they're going to come back stronger. I actually think it's the same with a lot of the venues as well. I think venues, and not only that, but we found new ways of reaching out to people, you know. And I think that's the interesting thing about this. I found it quite cathartic. I found it's made me think differently, and I think it's a shame for bands who don't make it through. But I think if that's the case, then it's their own mindset they need to get right. In most cases, it's not all about gigs, you know.
Focus, yeah.
Yeah, but I know we touched on post-COVID there on your last question, um, but how can you see venues like, you know, abiding to the 2 meter rule, and will it still have the same? Do you think it'll still have the same atmosphere?
Well, I've not been to any of these socially distanced gigs. I've heard about them, and I've heard about them from the bands who've actually said, well, the atmosphere has been pretty good.
Okay.
You know, everyone's sitting down. There's nobody at the barrier near the stage, which is where I would prefer to be when I'm at a gig. I've not been to them because I don't know. For me, it doesn't appeal. I want that full-on gig atmosphere. Although parts of it do appeal. I'm only small. I'm only 5'2". So, you know, there's probably more chance of me seeing more. But I'm quite good at pushing to the front. So who knows? Swings and roundabouts. But, you know, if that's how it has to be, then that's how it has to be. And it's better than nothing at all.
No, I totally agree with you. I think it's one of those where, my personal opinion, I'd love to be back on stage sooner rather than later. But there's nothing better than interacting with the crowd.
Yeah.
And I think we might lose some of that with the social distancing gigs and stuff. So
yeah, I mean, it depends how long it lasts. I mean, how long can they enforce social distancing for? What, you know, another year, 2 years, 3 years? When will it end? There has to be a point. Well, that's it. You know, there has to be an end point. I think that's what's causing so much frustration amongst everyone at the moment, is that, you know, going into another lockdown now, and obviously I'm speaking not just about musicians and people in the music industry, but for everyone. You're going to another lockdown for a month, being told, well, actually, it might be more than a month. And then, well, okay, so then what if numbers creep up again? Another lockdown, you know, how long is this going to go on for, basically? Everyone wants a definite end. And in this sort of situation, that's not possible. So it's just also uncertain.
One of the things that came out, Ian and I interviewed Ricky Warwick last week, and he was talking about what he's been doing with the online stuff. And he says that even if we go backwards and onto something different, you know, like we go back to the old style gigs, he still reckons he's learned a lot and found a lot of new fans across the world through social media that he wouldn't have done if he'd just gone out and gigged. And I don't think it'll ever get back to how it was, but I think it'll get better. And I think the other thing it'll be is people used to say about all these venues were closing pre-COVID. But it wasn't venues that were closing, it was pubs. And the venues were pubs. Right. And it was people who had got out the habit of going drinking. You know, they get into the habit of staying at home because it came from the smoking thing. And I actually think, conversely, this could go the other way, because there's nothing quite makes you realise what you're missing until you're missing it. And I think my gut instinct is that when it does come back, there's going to be a big resurgence and people going to see music, live music, whatever form that is. But I think also it could be the best thing for rock and metal, because I think out of all the genres, we're doing the best. Everybody, because we are working that way. I mean, that's just my gut instincts. Now, talking about the grassroots, because obviously that's where you, again, I've said before, your passion lies. And that's how we know you. If there's one thing, you know, that you think's lacking currently in the grassroots rock and metal, what would it be? And what do you think the answer to that is, Anne?
At one time, people used to say, in fact, very short time ago, people would say, well, this music has not been played on the radio, and that's the problem. Now I could name you easily half a dozen, probably more, radio stations, albeit small stations, internet stations, that are solely dedicated to playing grassroots music. So that's probably not the problem. I think that the thing that's needed is more mainstream exposure. Now, rock has never really been mainstream as such. It's had mainstream exposure and fans, but people that are into rock and the musicians themselves like to be edgy and like to be a little bit underground. So you've got a little dilemma here, you know, too mainstream and you're not cool enough or edgy enough, and not mainstream enough, nobody hears about you and you don't go on to sell out stadiums and arenas. So you've got to find a happy medium. What I would like, and I absolutely love, is to have a TV show, rock TV show, dedicated to exposing all the grassroots bands coming through, because it's not as if we don't have enough of them. There's absolutely loads, you know, tens, hundreds that I can name that would deserve to go on a rock show and for people to see them. And that's what I want. I mean, I grew up watching Noisy Mothers in the 90s as a teenager. It was on, I mean, we didn't have Sky then, so it must have been on one of the main channels. And I remember you had to record it with your old style video recorder about 3 o'clock in the morning. It was on right before Pingu, which was lovely, because then it got a whole load of metalheads, teenage metalheads into Pingu back then. And that's what we need to bring back, I think. That was crushed. And you know, there's so many videos on there, because I didn't have MTV, whatever, to watch these videos on. I would see for the very first time Skid Row, Alice Cooper, or, you know, the brilliant bands. They're brand new videos and news about, you know, what was being released and stuff. I absolutely loved it. And of course, you had other iconic shows like Headbangers Ball and the Tube, and depending on what era you grew up in, you know, I kind of missed Headbangers Ball because, like I say, I didn't have MTV. But I think that's what's needed. There's nothing like that at the moment. You have your Jules Holland programs, they're all very sort of established bands. Why can't we have that for the grassroots bands? You know, we've got the talent. That's what we need, is put it out there.
Yeah, I agree entirely. I mean, I think that one of the problems we have is, I know why I started, and that was because I started listening to my older cousins' records, like The Who and Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin in the early 70s when I was like 11, 12. And then I started seeing it on Top of the Pops, because you could actually see bands like that on Top of the Pops. And then it was the Old Grey Whistle Test. And then it was the Tube. And I wanted to be a singer in a band, in a rock band, because of the things I saw. Now, I reckon that that's the reason why why there's this glass ceiling, why we're not mainstream. What's going to inspire a kid to pick up a Les Paul or a Stratocaster or you name it, or, you know, a drum kit? It's by seeing people like them doing it. And I think you're spot on. I think I've said it for a lot. Ian and I have had this conversation, and we believe 100%. And do you know what? If a TV company was to actually have the balls to do it and take a punt on it, I think it'll pay them tenfold. I think it could explode.
100%.
Yeah, and people say, oh, people don't watch TV anymore, it's all YouTube. So, you know, if you look at TV figures, that couldn't be more wrong. People are still watching TV in the millions. So, you know, to get more exposure, and also you're seeing the band, you're really getting a feeling for who they are, what they look like, what they're all about, which you can't get so much on the radio or other means. So I think that's the way forward, honestly, to get that kind of level of exposure.
And would you have it live? Would you have it like them actually getting and playing live, so that people got a feeling for what it's like to be down the front row, if you like?
Yeah,
of a
live in front of an audience, ideally. Yeah, socially distanced if necessary. So, yeah, that would be my ideal.
Cool.
Yeah.
So obviously you've seen a lot of bands at the start of their careers. What is it you think that new bands need to focus on to make them succeed, give them the best opportunities going forward?
Social media. Be very as interactive as you possibly can. It's very time consuming, but it's so worth it, and it will pay off. I can think of bands that are on social media every day. They've hardly got that, you know, they've not really got that much material, but they've built up such a good reputation through the way they interact with people and the way they are and positive messages they're sending out. And people love that. You know, they want to be able to talk to bands. We're not going back to the days where you couldn't ever speak to anybody, you know, like rock stars were here and you were there. It's not like that now. Bands need to be communicating to not only their fans, but their potential fans. Yeah. And that is the way to do it, absolutely, going forward.
100%. So of everything that you've done in the music business, what's given you the most pleasure and why?
You know, that's a tricky one for me, because everything I've done, I've absolutely given 100% to at that time and loved. Like when I was writing, I'm not writing now. The last article I wrote was probably, last review I wrote would have been Guerrilla Rights Peach, beginning of this year. And I thought that would be a nice way to sort of finish my reviews. So I kind of started with them and ended with them. It felt like a kind of full circle thing for me. So I'm still doing feature articles and the occasional written interviews for various publications. But as a whole, I'm not really focusing on that now. But when I was writing, and I was doing a lot of writing, I was absolutely completely immersed in it and loved it. I felt gradually things sort of moved on for me naturally. I don't really stay doing the same thing for too long. I like to evolve, and, see what the appetite is out there, how you need to embrace different ways of doing things. So I then sort of moved on to interviews, and of course I was doing written interviews before my YouTube channel, and absolutely loved that, and thought, well, actually I think I prefer doing the interviews to the reviews. So then I got my YouTube channel, putting everything into that at the moment. So basically whatever I've done during my career so far, I've just been completely dedicated to, and so there isn't one thing I've loved more than the other. It's just been everything. Same with being on the radio, putting that playlist together, thinking, oh, I'm so happy with this playlist. Yep, really want people to hear it, what I've chosen this week. And, so everything, I got a huge amount of self-satisfaction from. And that's something that I never really had in any other jobs that I've had up until this point, that feeling of satisfaction. I've run my own business before in fitness, because I'm a qualified personal trainer as well. And I felt like that at the time, but something about that wasn't quite right for me. And I feel now that I've found my feet, like 100% in this industry. So hopefully that's where I'll stay.
Cool. So obviously you've got your own YouTube channel. Can you give us a little bit of an insight, any scoops or anything that you want to share with us? And what's in the future for it? What have you got planned? What have you got planned for the future for the
as far as YouTube goes, everything I'm doing now is via Skype or Zoom, because it all has to be social distance, obviously. I'm actually doing a lot more interviews than I was doing before, because it's so much easier. Beforehand, I would have to be going to a gig, arrange, be getting there early, arranging to interview the band before they went on, for sound check. It was a lot of faff, basically. It's much easier now. So actually, for a technophobe like me, I'm quite proud of myself for having mastered Skype. I haven't actually mastered Zoom. So I'm pleased you're hosting this, not me. But yeah, I can't remember the question. What am I going to do?
Future plans. Future plans.
Well, yes, future plans. I've hinted at this on my social media, and I've told a few people my plans. I'm scared to jinx it, but I will tell you because I feel in that kind of mood. As you mentioned, you know what? I'm terrible at keeping secrets. This is something I feel really strongly about and really excited about.
So have we got an exclusive here? Is this an exclusive?
Well, it might be. It might be. I am working with a TV production company to get the pitch out to the major stations for a new rock show that will be focusing on grassroots music, and kind of a Jules Holland vibe, getting bands playing live in front of an audience, a few interviews, a few other bits and pieces we're discussing at the moment. Who knows if it will happen or not? I don't have any contacts in TV, and it's all, everyone says it's about who you know, not what you know. Well, being in the music industry is hard enough. TV, it's a whole other minefield. I'm get passed around, well, this isn't the right person to speak to, and this should be the one. And even finding contact details of people, it's like they don't want to be contacted. You try and find a commissioning editor, bloody impossible. So anyway, we got there in the end. A lot of research went into this. A lot of emails were sent, and basically just got fingers crossed at the moment. I'm trying to figure out a plan B. If they all say it's not for them, then what? I don't want to give up on it. I feel like I've put so much thought into this. So I really want it to happen.
So are you going to be a presenter, or are you doing
Yeah.
Do you present it?
No, I would present it, yeah.
Are you going to be presenting by yourself?
Sorry?
Are you presenting
by
by
myself? No, I have a lovely co-host who was actually personally recommended to me by Nikki Smash of the Rocket Dolls. No, it's not Nikki Smash, but it's somebody that he knows.
All right.
Yeah, and he recommended him, and because I was having a little chat to Nikki about this a few months ago, and yeah, and he's like ideal co-host for me. So hoping it's going to work out. It's just yeah, it's one of those things that you think, well, if it doesn't happen, then what? You know, what will I do then? Much as I love doing what I'm doing on YouTube, I feel there's going to come a time where I'm going to want to move on from that. And well, that time has kind of come for me in that I'm already looking at the next stage, basically at taking it to TV. And it's not going to be my channel turned into a TV show, nothing like that. It's going to be very different format, as I've sort of outlined. But that's the next step as far as I'm concerned, anyway.
So if you win, yeah, we, as I say, the Scouser Scott would definitely support you guys no matter what. If you guys find out and you want to publicise it, by all means, come back on the show and tell us all about it, how it's going. I think it'll be epic to actually push the grassroots, because I think we need all the grassroots bands need all the support, and we need more people like yourself in there who's going to be able to push that, who know the grassroots bands. So 100% behind you on this one.
Thank you. I mean, I've already mentioned it to a couple of people, like I say, and they said, yeah, our band wants to do it. We want to do it. I mean, if it does get taken by channel, probably a lot of those decisions won't be in my hands anymore.
Yeah.
So, and as for the advertising and stuff, they'd be in charge of all that. So you just have to wait and see. You know, I'd rather have a small part in making this happen than no part at all. You know, basically, I'd rather just hope it happens.
Yeah, no, we do as well. As Ian says, it's needed, and we've alluded to the fact earlier, it's definitely needed. Okay, so your final question, Anne, you've got through so far unscathed. If any of your children told you they wanted to be a musician, what advice would you give them and why?
You know, this is a very pertinent question, because up until now, my children didn't show any interest in learning to play an instrument. I say up until now, both of them pretty much at the same time came to me and said, I want to play piano. The other one, I want to play electric guitar. So, right, brilliant. Okay, we don't have a piano, we don't have a guitar, but you know, they're both, one started learning piano already at school, and the other one is going to be learning guitar pretty soon, hopefully. So, you know, it's a great question. Obviously, they've got to follow their gift and whatever makes them happy in life. To become a musician, not only does it take a lot of dedication, but it takes being surrounded by the right people. And I would say to them, try and do as much as you can yourself. You know, try and do managing PR as much as you can, because at the end of the day, you know for a fact you've got your best interests at heart. You know, so basically that's one piece of advice. The other piece of advice is make sure that you treat everybody that you come across in the industry with respect, because the last thing you want is to get a bad reputation and people not want to work with you, because that's going to be the end of it. Yeah, there are people, certain band members with egos that unfortunately put them in a bad light. And that sort of thing isn't forgotten easily. You know, if you come across somebody that's rude to you or whatever, you're going to remember that. Likewise, if somebody's PR person or manager is rude to you, you're going to remember that, and you're going to think, right, well, why should I do something to help them? You know, their bands are doing great at the moment. There's going to be one day they're going to need me, possibly, and they burnt the bridges there. So yeah, basically, make sure you know who's working for you, what they're getting out of it, and make sure you're getting the right support.
Yeah, I think everything you said there is spot on. I think the other thing I would add to that is, if you're going to do it and you're serious about it, put in the work ethic. Again, that's something that Ian and I have come across with a lot of the musicians that we've interviewed. When you drill down into it, that's the one thing that they say, it's a job. It isn't a hobby. Once you start doing that, when you're learning an instrument, it's a hobby. If you decide then to make that your livelihood, it's a job, and you have to put in the same hours if you were doing a normal job, you know. And I think that's the dedication. You only get out of what you put into it. It's as simple as that.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, it depends what you want to get out of it. Last band I interviewed, yesterday, in fact, they said they don't care if anyone listens to the music. In fact, they would pay people to listen to it. They just do it for this self-expression, to be able to just make the music and have it done. And so I was asking them what success means to them. So success means different things to different people. But on the whole, if you want to make it as a professional musician, you've got to not only put out amazing songs, and that is the first and the last word at the end of the day. Make sure your songs are bloody fantastic, you know. And then really you can't go wrong. You've got to make sure the material is right. You know, always be yourself, and you know, try your best, try your hardest. Whatever you do, you should put, if you believe in it enough, you should be putting in 100% effort. So that applies to musicians as much as it does to anybody else.
Yeah, 100%.
To be perfectly honest, I think you've nailed it on the head there. And that is the same sort of response that we've had from, like John was saying before, from all the musicians we've interviewed, all the guys that we've interviewed and stuff like that. So one last thing from yourself, Anne. Do you want to give us all your links to your social media so people can follow you as well?
Right. Okay. I don't know the link to my YouTube because you have to have over a certain number of subscribers before you have your name. So to get my YouTube channel link, go to my Twitter page, which is Anne Estella Rock, and it's the pinned tweet on there. You can click on it directly. Then on Facebook, I'm at Anne Estella Rocks, and then Instagram Anne_Estella_Rocks. I think that's all of them.
Right? If you haven't caught them, I will make sure they are in the description below, which will be down there somewhere. So just click on them and check out Anne. And thank you very much. You've been great. You've been with the Scouser and Scott. So we really
I can't remember the last time I spoke so much. I'm going to stay silent the rest of the evening. And I've got an interview next, so I think, right, okay, just talk. I'll just sit back and listen.
Yeah, you'll sit there and expect them to be asking you questions.
They better not ask me any questions.
Thanks very much, Anne. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have been the Scouser and Scott. You know what to do. Until next time, hit that cowbell and subscribe.